welcome. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing some underclass students here. Thank you for responding to the invitations. So this is the Moral Philosophy class, Senior Thesis presentation. We have 3 of them scheduled for this afternoon. I just wanted to give a little bit of a perspective on this. And then we'll start with the Jessie page. We have Matthew Gormley and Elizabeth Robinson going today. This is the final exam in the Moral Philosophy course, and this is required for graduation, preparing the thesis and presenting it. Oh, I forgot to mention, let's put away phones and silence them, thank you, so we don't have distractions that way. I know it's, so we're not making noises. It's also good to pay attention. Required for graduation, the students have selected a topic of personal interest. Here are some things to listen for. The general perspective, listen for a formal moral argument toward a specific conclusion. So a formal moral argument toward a specific conclusion, and this should include a clear moral issue. Has to do with right and wrong, what we ought to do. So a clear moral issue, a clear argument for a specific moral position. What ought we to do? You should hear a thoughtful presentation of at least one significant counter-position. Or to anticipate a counter-argument and address that. You should hear evidence to support statements made, and references to authoritative sources in the Western classical tradition. Sound like a challenge? I would agree. This is very challenging for students at this level. And to be sure, this will be a big challenge for an adult. Witness the difficulties that we see in policy debates at the state and federal level. We talk about that in our moral philosophy class. This is something of a lost art. In fact, quite a lost art. So without any further comment, I will welcome Mr. Jessie Page, who has signed up to lead off, to come on up and do his presentation. Well, I forgot to mention one thing. We'll have a 10-minute presentation, and then there'll be some time, about 10 minutes, for some question and answer time. So if you've got some questions that come up, jot them down, and you can engage our presenter.
What are you doing?
No. That was just an example of police brutality. Police brutality, by definition, by commonlaw.com, police brutality is the use of excessive and/or unnecessary force used by police when dealing with civilians. Excessive use of force means a force well beyond what would be necessary in order to handle a situation. So, in my scenario, you saw that I was going through the trash. The same thing happened on February 6, 2015, in Madison, Alabama. Well, a man from India was visiting his son, and he forgot where his son lived. So he started going through the trash of that neighborhood. Well, if you saw someone going through your trash, suspicious, correct? So the neighbors called the police. 2 Madison city police officers responded to that scene. They tried to get his attention, and he didn't speak the language. So he kept telling them no, no, no. When they started to try to stop him, he immediately threw his hands into his pockets. So in the fear of the officers' lives, they assumed that he was reaching for a weapon. So they throw him onto the ground and handcuff him. Now, during this time, a third police officer was arriving on scene, and his dashboard camera caught the glimpse of the officer taking down the older gentleman. And that video was released to the media. With the media, they blew it out of proportion and they called it outrage, to where Officer Eric Parker was dismissed and is now facing 2 charges of federal assault. Socrates explains that we as a society are responsible for knowing what is right and wrong, and that when an injustice is caused, it affects not just the people who were involved in the scene, but also every member of society. That is why in a society, a court system or justice system needs to be set into motion and into place. Professor Law of Harvard University says, Justice is the first virtue of social institution, as is truth is to the system of thought. What that means is that with the justice system, it involves an understanding of both the victim and the defendant. That's why in the American court system, we have judges. In order to become a judge in the United States of America, they have to be 2 years as an attorney. Then they have to be recommended by another federal judge to become a judge. Then they have to take testing to become a judge. And then they will shadow a judge to understand the rules of a judge. We also have a jury system. And the reason that we as America stick out is because we have such a thing as a jury system. A jury system is consisted of 12 members on a jury. Their role is to listen to the case and understand what happened in that situation, to decide if the victim was wronged or if the defendant was falsely accused. Now, you might be thinking, why would someone trust the American court system? The media has blown it up to where the American court system is not something we can trust. The American court system actually is more used because we use members of our society. We have a say because, as Socrates says, it has a crime or persecution has an effect on every one of us. It has that blow. In Russia, in order to become a judge, it's pretty much the same as here in America. But the difference is that judge does not serve in the area in which he lives. He has to live at least 100 miles away from the city that he grew up in. Meaning that that judge has no understanding of what goes on in that community, how that lifestyle goes. So, when cases are brought up, he really has no understanding where the defendant or the victim are coming from. And there is no jury system. It is just that judge who makes those decisions. In China, if you know the emperor and you're good buddies with him, there's a chance that you just might be made a federal judge. Simple as that. With no understanding of the law, no understanding of anything, really, you could be a garbage man. But if you marry the emperor's daughter, you could become a judge. So the reason that the jury system is so effective, like I said again, we as members of a society have a duty to make sure that those crimes don't have a devastating effect on us. When becoming a jury, it's selected from people of that local community. Then they are also screened. So say with that police brutality case that was brought up, those jury members that were selected would be questioned, how do you feel about the police? Do you feel like the police are aggressive and step out of line? Have you ever been a victim of police brutality? Have your family ever been a victim of police brutality? And if you show a biased opinion, they're going to leave you out of the jury because they want more unbiased and more people that are willing to understand what is going on. With the media and how they're able to, the media's job is to make things exciting and to have you watch things. You have to be able to watch those commercials and go, wow, I want to watch that news program to see what they're talking about. So during extreme cases, all media communications is blocked for jury members. It is recorded in the OJ versus the People case. Those jury members had to stay in a hotel with limited media intake because with it being such a huge case, they had to filter that to where those jury members were able to give a verdict based on the facts that were given both by the attorneys. When we're in a society, we're all different members. We all have a different role. We all have a duty to society. All members of society are bound together by the agreeable bands of love and affection, and, as it were, drawn to one common center of moral good. That is a quote by Mr. Adam Smith. As a society, it is our duty and responsibility to know what is right and what is wrong, and to step into situations with an unbiased opinion in order to make sure that both the victim and the one who is prosecuted are given the justice they deserve. In that case with Officer Eric Parker, he was found innocent on his case due to the fact that video showed that his life could have been in danger. That the older gentleman was uncooperative and was putting himself and the officers on duty in danger. This case went to court 3 times because media got to jury members on the first and second case. So it was filtered, and jury members had a hard time understanding what exactly happened due to the media exploiting the video that was only recorded, was pretty much the takedown. The third case, they had limited media opportunity, and they were able to address those needs and found that Officer Parker was in the right of arresting the older gentleman.
2 minutes.
Okay. In the 7th Amendment, it is trial by jury. It says, in suit at common law, well, value and controversy. Nope, that's the wrong one, I'm sorry. I lost it. I apologize. The 7th Amendment talks about how we as American citizens have a right for a trial by jury. The reason that we as the American court system set it up that way, of our common peers, is that more severe cases when we were under the rule of England had to be addressed in the courts of England and had jury members of the England party in society, so they didn't understand the American. So that is why here in America is why we have a jury of people in our community. When injustice is let loose in society, society has a tendency to crumble and let itself be destroyed. That is why we as members of society must realize the importance that the American court system has, and why we need to be willing to look at cases with an unbiased perspective to truly understand what happened and to make sure that those people deserve the justice they need. Thank you.
So this is the 10 minutes of question and answer, or question and discussion. And I have a couple, but I will let others. Or take that back. I'll give one as an example. And Jessie said, "Yeah, he's ready." She's like, "Bring it on. Test me." So, good man. So, you mentioned that we have a duty to protect one another in society. I have an exact quote, but you mentioned duty a number of times. Where does this duty derive from, and how would you convince someone who disagrees with this duty that is their moral obligation?
When we join a society, we're going to abide by the laws which are given, which is your, as in a sense, a duty to obey and follow those laws. Like Adam Smith says, we're all different members of society and we're bound together by the agreeable bands of love and affection. So it's our duty to maintain those bands of love. A duty means that we're well educated and we know what is needed for us.
And that we voluntarily agree on these things. So it would be unvirtuous to agree and then abrogate our agreed on responsibility.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Jessie, great job. You introduced the question, maybe about halfway through, why trust the U.S. court system? Just to remind exactly where you were. After that, you talked about in Russia to become a judge. So you remember where you were at that point?
Yeah.
So the question was, why trust the U.S. court system? Now I'm going to ask you that same question. Why trust the U.S. court system?
Why we trust the American court system is the fact that our judges are qualified, more qualified and they go through more qualifications, and they have an understanding of that community and society which consists. Like here in Edgewood, our community is a little different compared to the community in Albuquerque. So when you go to court, you'll have a judge who's familiar with Edgewood or has an understanding of Edgewood, and those jury members will also be more selected from Edgewood. Ms. Kimball.
First of all, good job. You've done very well with the presentation. I'm wondering about certain cases that have been, say, polarized of late. So, most of them are gun situations somewhat similar to the one you described, but involve usually a black man being taken down by a police officer. A lot of people are saying that justice has not been served in many of those cases. So, back to Mr. Drury's question about how we can trust the court system, what if there is a case of injustice, as some people have said? Why would that be?
If there was a felt of injustice that was solved, like I mentioned in Officer Parker's case, was that they can call for a retrial if they feel like evidence was tampered with or things weren't addressed that needed to be addressed. If they felt like that local court system was agreed upon and that verdict stands true, there's a court of appeal. So we start off with the community-based courts, and then they'll make a decision, and if they don't want to retrial or withhold, not withhold, that's the wrong word. They will stand by the decision that was made in their courtroom. Then there's a state court. A state court can override that because the judges have moved up and they have a better understanding in trial, and they can review the case, and it can move its way up all the way to the Supreme Court if it has to, if they feel like a true injustice has been caused. When an injustice is caused, it's also on the fact that members of society have looked at the evidence and gone, yes, that person did it, or no, that person did it.
Think it's possible for the justice system to be working and people still complain about it?
Everyone's going to complain. There's complaints everywhere. Science works, like science again and again has proven that it works, and people will be like, no, it doesn't.
You don't complain about science.
Of course not. No, I love science.
Is there time for another question?
Yes, we do.
So you've portrayed the media as not contributing to the justice of the system, but sensationalizing it and keeping us from achieving justice. In your view, is there any hope for media to actually help us find justice in society?
So I'm not saying that all media is wrong and bad. Information can be presented through the media in which you can educate yourself and understand all the court cases that were similar, and you can review those as well. So there's a good and a bad side to media. It just depends on how entertaining you can make it. Normally when the case is being evolved, media will present it to be more entertaining, but once cases have been resolved and settled down, media will still release reports of what happened, was the person guilty, innocent, and give a breakdown of what happened in that courtroom, so you can analyze what happened in that courtroom.
I'll finish with one more.
Okay.
You criticized the Chinese system. That's what I heard you say, that it's not as morally upright as our American system. What would you say is the chief characteristic of the Chinese justice system that makes it immoral?
I think it's the qualification. I think because the Chinese court system is based on my cousin's friends, uncles, postmen's, dogs, groomer, was a judge, is the difference. And I failed to mention that in China, they can set any rules that they want to. So if you got a speeding ticket and that judge really doesn't like you, he can put you to death.
So that would be wrong. You haven't established that.
Right, of course. I would say it's wrong because it is a minor crime. It doesn't truly have an effect on society until it turns into involuntary manslaughter, into which an accident is caused and someone is killed. So that's why we have traffic laws, to reduce that risk. And that's why we also have laws in set that you can't exceed punishments on minor crimes like speeding tickets.
So you'd say retaliatory actions don't necessarily correspond with justice would be immoral.
I don't understand the question.
Well, if somebody's retaliating, you're saying, well, why would the judge say, well, we need to execute that speeder? What's his motivation for doing that? He wouldn't do that with his buddy or his
Right.
friend. So he must be presumably retaliating against this person because of something he doesn't like about them.
Yeah.
Would people do that?
It happens. I mean, we've all had those thoughts, well, that person wronged me and I deserve to wrong them back, or do something back to them, or make their way of living a little awful at some point. That could be hurting their feelings, to slashing their car tires, to even killing that person.
So it sounds like you're saying that the Chinese system does not hold human nature in check as well as the American system.
Correct. As Adam Smith says, there are certain members of society who are at all times ready to hurt and injure one another, close quote. So there are people who have a desire and want to do that. I'm not quite sure what the mindset and reason for that is, but those type of people do exist. And that's why the court systems are set up, and that's why we have a jury system as well, because community members will have a say on that person as well as a judge.
We have time for one more question. This is his last chance to be a senior giving a thesis defense. So
You've referred to Adam Smith quite a few times. Who exactly is he?
So Adam Smith is a Scottish philosopher who lived from 1723 to 1790. So he was around for the American Revolution. He also wrote the book Wealth of Nations. And he really gives a breakdown of society and of government and economics. So.
I got one.
Okay.
So you talked about qualifications for being a judge and also being on the jury. What about how is the American or the U.S. Court system better as far as checks and balances?
Like I've said before, we do have a court of appeals. So if you feel like one judge wasn't qualified, or a set of jury members were not able to give unbiased opinions and give their verdicts based on facts, they can go see another judge of a higher court to help resolve any issues.
Well, thank you for your questions, your attention, and let's give Jessie another round of applause. Make sure I get your final draft. Thank you. At this point, we have a little bit of a break because we are not scheduled for Mr. Gormley, Matthew Gormley, until 4:40.